Hello and welcome. We are now ready to begin today's webinar, Building and Managing an Effective Work Team. My name is Virginia Becaccio. I am a program coordinator with Rutgers Executive and Professional Education, and I will be your host and moderator for this webinar. Rutgers EPE is the proud sponsor for today's webinar, which highlights timely topic areas and issues in human resources, leadership, and management. We have formally allotted 30 minutes for today's webinar. You can send your questions throughout the presentation using the questions box. The orange arrow depicted here opens and closes your controls. With your controls open, you will see the questions box on the lower half and the send button on the lower right. We will have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded and a link to the archived version will be sent to you via email. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our instructor. Lori McIsaac, Rutgers EPE instructor, is a management consultant with a specialization in leadership development and change management. Ms. McIsaac's expertise includes assessing management needs and customizing learning programs that solves business problems. Lori has worked with both small and medium-sized organizations, as well as many Fortune 500 companies over her almost 20-year career. Lori, please take it away.
Thank you, Virginia, and welcome everyone. Building and leading an effective work team is an important topic, and I'm excited that you're here to spend some time on it. Our objectives for the webinar include understanding the characteristics of team development, implementing team startup tools, and learning the keys to developing an action plan to improve team performance. Let's look at what the experts say about teams, a topic that's been studied for many years in the management literature. Teams, by definition, are a small number of people with complementary skills who are committed to a common purpose, a set of performance goals, and a common approach for which they hold themselves mutually accountable. Those of you who work in teams may find many of those parts of the definition quite familiar. So why do we work in teams in our organizations so frequently today? Again, the experts tell us that in any situation requiring the real-time combination of multiple skills, experiences, and judgments, a team inevitably gets better results than a collection of individuals operating within confined job roles and responsibilities. So as you see, the real-time combination is what's critical in why organizations use teams to get results and to get them on a time frame that is effective to improve performance. In their research, the experts had some common sense findings that we can share today. The first one is that a demanding performance challenge tends to create an effective team. They also learned that the team basics of discipline are frequently overlooked. They saw team opportunities existing all over the organization, and they learned that the teams at the top of the organization tend to be the most difficult to manage. And finally, they learned that people generally prefer individual accountability over team accountability. Now, some of the more surprising or uncommon sense findings the experts learned include the idea that a company which has a strong performance management system tends to create a more real or a more effective team. They also learned that high-performing teams are actually quite rare in organizations. They learned that hierarchy and teams work well together with those strong performance standards. Teams are always naturally integrating their performance and their learning. Again, they learned about the accountability challenge that many teams struggle with as individuals prefer their own accountability over that of the collective team. And finally, they are learning that teams continue to be the important unit of performance in many companies for all the reasons that we had discussed. We've come to our first poll question. Do you feel you are part of an effective work team?
Okay, you could see that the poll has been launched. And if you could just take a second to answer that. And we'll just give it a few more seconds. And I'm going to close the poll now and share the results. So, Lori, it looks like 79% do feel they are part of an effective work team, and 24% do not.
Interesting. Thank you very much for your participation, and thank you, Virginia, for those results. Well, from my perspective, that's quite a good result. It's nice to know that the folks on the webinar today do feel they're part of an effective work team. And it's not too surprising because, as I said, many organizations have really been working on improving the gathering of folks to be in a team and the management process for them to be effective. So that's great news for our organizations. Let's take a moment and think about what it takes for a team to be effective from a startup standpoint. And I'm sure many of you have team charters, roles and responsibilities charts, and those kinds of wonderful tools in your organizations that keep you on track to accomplish the goal of the team. Instead of going through a long list, I decided I liked the idea of showing this slide to help us really think about what it looks like to be an effective team from beginning to end. So let's just have some fun with this, this cartoon. So it looks to me in the first box that we have a customer explaining what they'd like the team to create. The project leader, an important member of a team, has understood that result to be box number 2. Translating that into an analyst who had to design that product, you see box number 3. The analyst has put together the product from what they've understood it to be. The next one tells us how the programmer or someone in the IT department, no offense to you IT folks out there, may have in fact wrote a program or wrote a product to reflect what was told to him or her. The beta testers did the next slide, number 5 here, and the business consultant, people like me, then decided that the last box on the top row is how they envisioned this product to be. On the lower left-hand corner, excuse me, you see how the project was documented. All of us can laugh a bit and recognize that that's the least favorite part of what we do on a team is putting it all down on paper. And the next one tells us about what operations actually installed from a product standpoint. Now, the customer, back to the beginning here, the customer was billed in the third box of the bottom row. Looks to me like a very elaborate billing process. And the next one might make us laugh a little, but hopefully not too much, and this customer hopefully is not crying too much, how the team supported the product for the customer once it was delivered. And last but not least, you have to remember marketing. Marketing then decided to advertise that product in the second to last. And finally, the last box of the tire swing tells us all that the customer really needed that product. If you go back to the beginning, the very first box in the upper left-hand corner, the customer explained it in that way. We as an organizational team took it through all our different functions and departments and ended up perhaps not at all what they may have wanted and therefore what the customer may have needed. So again, I know you have your tools in the form of templates and documents and roles, but I just wanted to sort of help us think a little bit out of the box here about what it is that we need to do as a team in terms of communicating the expectations across all parts of our organization to really deliver what the customer wants. And again, customers are both internal and external to our organizations, so project teams need to be very aware. All right. So one of the ways that we can codify the concept that teams, although with all the best intentions, frequently end up having challenges along the way. Lencioni is a gentleman who has been studying teams and business organizations for quite some time and put together a really simple idea in a small little book, if you haven't read it, called Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And he said, these are the 5 things that every team that I've studied seems to have a challenge with and might even go so far as to call them a dysfunction. The first is an absence of trust. The second is a fear of conflict. The third is a lack of commitment. The fourth is an avoidance of team accountability. The fifth is an inattention to team objectives. Now again, the question on the table is, if teams are to be effective, we have to understand what are the challenges or obstacles that they face to becoming effective or high-performing teams. These are the 5 general categories that this gentleman and others in the field have studied to say this is what gets in their way. So my question to you, launching poll question number 2 here, the second question is, which dysfunction of a team does your work team suffer from the most?
Okay, and this poll, as you can see, is also launched. So if you could take a moment to select your answer. We'll just give a few more seconds. And we're going to close the poll out and share the results. So Lori, 24% answered for number 1.
Okay.
20% answered for number 2. 12% for number 3. 24 for number 4. And 20 for number 5.
Terrific. Thanks, Virginia, and thank you for your participation. Well, I think those are some very interesting results that reflect Lencioni's research in that they're almost relatively evenly distributed among the 5 dysfunctions. It looks like number 3, lack of commitment, is not a dysfunction that is shared by too many teams, and that's really good to learn because, again, organizations have spent a lot of time and money putting together hopefully committed work teams to accomplish a project or a goal for the organization. But interestingly enough, number 1, 2, 4, and 5 are almost all about 20% of the respondents here. You folks are telling us that that's the dysfunction that they suffer from the most. So we have some trust challenges, some conflict challenges, some accountability issues, and certainly the objectives of the team to be attended to more so than not. So very helpful and very interesting. Thank you, Virginia, and again, thank you, participants. So what Lencioni did, so as not to be too negative, is he also put together some thoughts around actions or ideas that organizations can take with a positive approach to remedying these 5 dysfunctions. So obviously they are what's located here on slide 15. Teams really have to trust one another. And there's lots of ways that your organizations have engaged in this kind of activity, but trusting one another really has to be on the top of the list. Number 2, they actually want teams to engage in unfiltered conflict around ideas. And the key word obviously is unfiltered, namely that people leave their positions and their authority and all the trappings of an organization sort of outside the team and come into a team and talk about the conflict from an idea point of view, not a position, not an authority, not a personality, but what is good about this idea, what is challenging about this idea, and how do we make a decision. So a really good conflicting discussion about that shows both sides. Number 3, obviously from a commitment standpoint, they commit to the 2 most important things a team needs to have, not just roles, not just responsibilities or actions, but the decisions they're going to make and the plan that they're going to take to implement those decisions. In my experience, I've heard a lot of folks talk about how teams have wonderful activity and work being done, but decisions get put off and therefore actions are delayed. So very important for the team to focus on decisions and actions. Obviously on the accountability side, it's about that collective accountability, holding each other accountable for delivering on those role and responsibility charts that we make so nicely, making sure that we can deliver on them and that we can help each other achieve those timeframes and those goals from an accountability standpoint. That what you have to do is equally as important as what I have to do, and we have to commit to the timeframes we've agreed to. And then the collective results, obviously working together to be sure that what objectives were set are the ones that are accomplished. Now, these look really straightforward and obvious from a management or business standpoint, but you and I both know that they are really quite hard to implement in the real world. So an important focus for us to remind ourselves on our teams how to achieve these kinds of approaches to eliminate the obstacles that we talked about as a dysfunction. Okay, and finally, at Rutgers, in our programs and in our webinars, we are very committed to asking participants to commit to an action plan to improve performance or results. We love training, we do it all day long, but we also recognize that for organizations to make change, the people who are trained in new ideas and new concepts and perhaps being reminded of things they already know, like in teams, that we go ahead and implement something different or something important that can change the results tomorrow. So I'm just going to give you a couple of ideas, and I'd hope that you would look at these and think about what can you do in your team around one of these 5 action planning items. First is to enhance communication. Almost all of the 5 dysfunctions that we read about and talked about today certainly can be improved with communication enhancement, namely with yourself and with others. Number 2 is also critical, and sometimes we take it for granted. Learning a conflict resolution method, if you don't have one in your teams, is very important so that you can move beyond conflict constructively into solutions and therefore actions. And practice that conflict resolution. Absolutely, with a simple conflict, I've helped teams role play what they want to do to make some decisions and to really hear what it sounds like to disagree strongly and then come to some understanding of a decision that is agreed upon and one they can act on. And number 3 talks about understanding the passion of team members. Getting to know your teammates and the members of your team and what they really love to do or are really great at can actually help the team move forward as we continue to jockey for time frames and milestones, and helping each other with the work of the team. Knowing what people are great at can help. The compensation plan for the team is always a tricky one. Obviously, the teams are part of an organization that have a performance management structure that may or may not suit the team in terms of individual accountability and or team accountability, but certainly bringing up the topic to discuss it for an open conversation in the team and making sure that the team leader and or sponsor is aware of any conflicts or challenges that you may face and potentially make some suggestions for improvement. And finally, at the beginning of the team work, the members should at least have some involvement in setting the goals based on our wonderful SMART goal definition, that these goals certainly have to be, you remember them, the measurable, the accountable, the achievable, the realistic, time-bound, etc. You know, making sure that these people can commit to goals that make sense to them, that they feel they can achieve. So hopefully one of these speaks to you and your team relative to what you thought about today, and you may be able to implement something exciting and different and potentially action-oriented as soon as tomorrow. So that concludes my piece of the presentation. I hope you learned something and enjoyed listening, and I'm going to turn it back over to Virginia if she would be happy to take it away.
Lori, thank you so much for this great presentation and for your time today. As a thank you to the participants for joining us in today's webinar, we would like to extend a 20% discount on EPE programs offered this fall in human resources, leadership, management, and project management. Please go to our website, epe.rutgers.edu, and you will use the discount code 101515. For more research on today's topic, Lori will be instructing in our Essential Management Skills program, Building and Managing an Effective Team, on November 17th and December 8th in Piscataway. So we are now at the question and answer portion of the webinar, and we do have some questions that we received throughout the webinar. And Lori, our first question is, the person writes, I have a very talented person on my team that I'm afraid of losing. What can I do to keep this person?
Well, thank you. That's a very nice question, and probably a common question many of us feel as team members or team leaders. Having a really talented person on a team, to this person's question, is both an asset and a liability. And I guess the challenge for the liability is how to retain them on the team as opposed to losing them to a more interesting or more challenging either project within the organization, or even worse, another organization, because they feel they need to make a change. I guess I would really go back to that third item that talks about really knowing the passions of your team members when we talked about how to implement action item that would improve your team performance. I think it's important to really get to know what this person loves doing and try to find a way within the team structure that they can use those skills and passions for the benefit of the team. Now, if for some reason that doesn't work, that the person really finds that what they love to do or want to do doesn't necessarily show up on the team, then perhaps you would want to talk with the team sponsor or your manager directly to find out ways to have this person assist if they can on your team, but maybe even belong to a different team, because as an organization, we're all on the same team, and I would rather have this talented person stay with my organization and perhaps be on a different team that uses their strengths better than my team does, than to lose the person altogether.
Okay, great. Thank you. The next question is, my team members don't see themselves as accountable to help each other get the work done to meet deadlines. What can I do?
Okay, another very common question and a very important one on a team. It comes back to accountability, and it comes back to the very simple question we have to ask ourselves: whose job is it anyway? And on a team, as we write those roles and responsibilities and those action items and to be completed by deadlines, if I have a task to be completed and you have a task to be completed, we have to at least share the understanding that if one of us gets in trouble and can't complete a task by a certain date, can't complete a task because they don't have the knowledge or the resources to do so, that we as team members need to invite the others to ask us for some help. And I firmly believe that the team leader is going to set the culture or the tone of that team to be a team that works well together and helps each other accomplish goals by the time frame required, by telling folks that they are available for assistance and anyone on the team is also available. So if you keep good documentation about who's doing what, everybody understands the different skills and value of the other members, and that we're all in this together for the accountability of getting it done on time, then we should invite each other to work together, help each other, and most importantly, remove some of the other work, if possible, that they have to do if we find ourselves in a crunch time. So negotiating with other managers or folks whom they report to that says, this is a very important priority and I need some relief on other projects in order to finish this. But it really comes back to communication. Everybody on the team needs to know that we're all in the same boat, and if we have concerns or challenges or need help, all we really have to do is ask.
Okay, great. Thank you. Our next question is, everyone on my team avoids conflict at the team meetings and then argues afterwards, which slows down the work. How can I fix this problem?
That sounds like another common problem, and certainly a very difficult one to solve. And I really feel strongly about the idea that teams in their rules of engagement or in their charters should define a process for conflict resolution. And there are many out there, and like I said, many organizations have them formally defined, and many of them do not have them formally defined. And it is my experience that if you are on a team and a team member or even a team leader, you should at least request at the beginning of a team's work, how are we going to solve problems or resolve conflicts? And not accept, we'll come to that when we get there, as an answer, because there are very specific processes of mediation and discussion that team leaders or even outside members of the organization who are not on that team can assist in resolving, and not having it be a personality battle regarding conflict. So very strongly, I think the team members and the team leader need to agree at the beginning of the team project, if we have, or rather when we have conflict, we'd like to at least have a formalized process that we all agree we're going to use to move through the conflict, because conflict can be positive if it results in a better result.
Okay, great. Thank you. Our next question says, I have a really great team member that has a problem with other team members. This member tends to try very hard and is very task-driven. So in turn, she is harsh, and this makes others not want to work with her. Do you have any advice?
Absolutely. Number one, if you are the team leader of that team and she is a member, this is a very, very important coaching opportunity for her. The concept here is that you are extremely delighted with her work as a task-driven doer, because we need task-driven doers on our teams. However, I would like to believe that she doesn't realize, or he doesn't realize, that his abrupt task-driven behavior puts people off and does make it less desirable for someone to want to work with them. Now, we're not going to ask them for a personality change. We need to focus on the impact of their behavior on other team members and their work. It's not a popularity contest. It's not about personality here. It's just simply saying to the person in a coaching kind of a way, Mary or John, we're really appreciative of the hard work you've put in on the team. One of the things that happened at the last team meeting was the impact of that kind of behavior on the overall team and its morale or its work was, and I'd like to suggest a change for you to try next time in order to improve your actions with the rest of the team. So you really have to be very specific with this person about their behavior, how it impacts the performance of the team and the ability to work well together, and suggest an alternate behavior. This is not about personality. It's not about liking and not liking people. And I say this only because my experience, and I have a lot of it with teams, is this is the stuff we get into as team leaders that we don't want to get into, but it ends up because they get defensive and they tell us, oh, it's her, she's just too sensitive, or it's him, he just doesn't understand. And that's not the issue. The issue is coaching this person to understand what their behavior is, what impact it has, and how they can adjust that behavior for improved team performance and interaction. I hope that helps.
Great, thank you, Lori. And our final question is, do you have any tips for managers on how to build camaraderie between team members?
Absolutely, that's a great question. I tend to think that in this day and age where everybody's too busy to get together, we don't always get together to know each other better inside of work, let alone outside of work. I just feel strongly that a team building activity that you can do quickly and easily with your team can just help people get to know each other a little bit better. There's all kinds of things you can do. One of my favorites, I don't know if you can get them together for lunch. You don't even have to buy it, but if you want to, that's great. But get people together for sort of a lunch and collaboration kind of session. And you can take a few icebreakers that you might get from any team building workbook. One of my favorites is asking people to not talk. Remember, everyone loves to talk. So if you ask people not to talk and give them some different exercises to go through, it can be fun. One could be, okay, line up in order of your birthdays from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. Sounds silly, sounds simple, but if you can't talk, it can be a lot of fun. They start, flailing their arms and numbers, and I'm on month number 6, day number 4, and they get all mixed up, and then you call time after 3 minutes, and they're of course all in the wrong order, and we can make a joke or laugh about it. And then we can talk about who drove the furthest distance to get to work today. And again, no talking, line up from the furthest distance to the shortest distance. And again, it might just be interesting ideas about how to get to know them better and how to get them to laugh a little bit. Camaraderie is usually about people skills and knowing each other just a little better and feeling a little more comfortable, which also should be able to invite them to ask for help with each other when they are under pressure situations or under those kinds of challenges. So there's lots of stuff on the internet about team building, but the short answer is team building. Lunch is great if you can do it, and team build, or just take a 15-minute break in the afternoon and say, you know what, guys, we need a break. Let's go have a little fun and do some things like that.
Great, thank you. Okay, so that was the last question that we're able to get to. So this concludes today's webinar. As I mentioned earlier, a link to the archived recording of the presentation will be sent to you via email within the next few days. If we've missed any of your questions, we will get to them. If you'd like to send To continue to send us questions, please do so. You would send that to info@epe.rutgers.edu. And any topics that you would like to see covered in our upcoming webinars, please also send your suggestions to us at info@epe.rutgers.edu. So thank you, everyone. We hope to see you in our future workshops. And for additional program information, please go to our website, epe.rutgers.edu.
Wonderful. And thank you again for your time and participation, and good luck on your teams.